Okay, developmental influences. So we're looking at childhood experiences. So here's our review. And today we're going to look at socioeconomic factors and childhood experiences. And because we know that what happens as a kid is often a predictor of our likelihood of developing PTSD later on. But we do a recap. Race to the front. I've bought some cool barnyard animal buzzers. You could use that for these as well. But I like the race to the front because it just gets movement, and maybe my guys are just more competitive than normal. But I just think, yeah. Anyway, this is just a fun one. Never fails to get the kids into it from the beginning. Okay, and then we can use this to discuss the answers and do some recap. Okay. All right. Here's another TED Talk. Now this is 16 minutes, so you might want to assign this for homework if you like. But I think this is a really good video to watch where she talks about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and the problems that these cause later in life. Now she's not talking about PTSD. She's talking more about health and general health. But knowing about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, is really key. Because that's what we're looking at here with our explanation. And then this slide is here to write down the answers. Okay, so we know that from a lot of the research, it's a very common finding, people in poorer neighborhoods have a higher chance of developing PTSD. And this gives us another possible, in the last lesson we had a possible reason why, linking to the ability to deal with trauma. Now we're going to look at how that might link to poverty. And the idea could be that it is affecting the hippocampus. What they found was, okay, so this is just a bit of recap. So they correlated socioeconomic status with amygdala volume. And what they found, I mean, I'm using very unacademic language here, richer kids, but I just want to keep it simple for the first part, but they should be able to use the academic language in their final explanations. But what they found was this was correlated. So the more money you had, the more developed your hippocampus was. So what this could say is that this socioeconomic status creates that, just like genetics could, maybe this also could contribute to the risk factor of having a low hippocampus, which could contribute to PTSD. And what it also did, though, was looked at parent-child interactions. And so this is going further into why this connection might exist. So the way they did that was they had a parent and a kid in a waiting room, and they put a little gift there, but the kid wasn't allowed to touch it or open it, so they're trying to tempt the kid, trying to frustrate him. And they said, you can open that when your parent finishes filling out the questionnaire. And what's going to happen inevitably, the kid's going to start nagging, he's going to say, Mommy, hurry up. And then what they're doing is they are recording the interactions between the parent and child. And so what they found was the more supportive the parenting, the larger the hippocampus was in the child. So this is another correlation. So again, so what could be happening here is that the lower socioeconomic status could be increasing the stress, which is affecting the parenting style, which is what is damaging the hippocampus. Because if we think about it, that's a better explanation, because kids, might not necessarily know. I mean, it's not just having money that's going to change your brain. There's some factor involved in there. There's some thought process or some mediating factor. So, this is the explanation here. And there's loads of studies, right, that show how childhood environment and interaction with the parents affect our brain. This is one specific example. And then, what we're saying here is that maybe parenting styles, which is affected by socioeconomic status, poverty, is causing the risk factors for developing PTSD. So you can see how we're getting really in-depth into these explanations. But what I tried to do with the unit was have the very basic studies, very basic explanations for students, and then you can make them as complex as you like by adding to them. Okay, this gives an alternative explanation, and it's basically saying that in poorer neighborhoods you're more exposed to violence. So this is a good bit of a good critical thinking counter argument to add to the explanation we just gave. Now, for the end of this topic, what I would say is they should be able to choose one difference. So I don't think they need to be able to explain all of these. I think they should focus on one or two, because at least as long as I've got two studies to write about, I think I would probably encourage socioeconomic status, because you've got a couple of different explanations there with a couple of different studies that they could use. But anyway, let them choose their strength and get them to explain. And this doesn't have to be a whole essay, I wouldn't say. Just they're writing explanation, maybe 200 or 300 words, and using one study. So it's a bit like it's going to be the same length as probably a short answer question. Okay. This is an interesting TED Talk about economic inequality, but they just might want to watch this if they're interested. But I would always remind students to keep filling in the gaps in their workbooks. And that's the end of the prevalence of PTSD. So what we're looking at now is treatments. So as you can see, we've got loads of, in a very short time, we've looked at lots of different etiologies, which is why I think it's the best topic to study for, because there's heaps to write about, even though, and the explanations are pretty well developed, but it's also why I'd encourage students to study smarter, because they can write really amazing answers for the etiologies topic if they spend the time preparing and revising. They should have treatments as a backup, and I think ignore diagnosis. But that's just me.